On this episode of asoulsquest podcast, Omar and I are discussing the topic of embracing uncertainty and turning fears into fuel for personal and professional growth. Stay tuned.
All right, so here we are again.
Here we are again.
Yeah. So
how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm in a much better mood than you are, clearly.
Oh, I'm in a great mood.
Are you?
So you must be in an excellent mood.
I'm in a fabulous mood right now.
Awesome. That's great.
Fabulous. I like
Good.
that. I like that word. Fabulous.
I'm glad that you like that word. Yes.
I do.
So what is today's topic? What are we talking about
We
today?
are talking about embracing uncertainty.
Oh, really?
And then turning that fear into fuel for, development, personal and professional development or growth.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. No, that's a very good topic, actually.
It is a very good topic because I
Yeah.
think that...
I feel it. I feel fear almost every day. It's like
Yeah.
my life is defined by fear. It's trying to surpass it on a regular basis. You know.
Well, then this episode is for you.
It actually, I might be taking a lot from it. To be honest with you,
I hope so.
Yeah.
I did some research for this. I like to do research on these episodes because, one, I like to have some sort of, listen, I this is where I found this and this is legitimate,
Mm-hmm.
But I also like
sourced material. Sourced.
Yes, and to give it substance, you know what I mean, and to
yeah.
back up what it is that we're talking about. Not only can we talk about it from our own personal experiences because those are real. That is a real thing.
Yep.
But also that this exists on this platform of where research has been done and on a philosophical level where people actually have conducted
On a
research
practical
on these things.
scientific level too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so fear and uncertainty are really big. It's a big deal,
Yes.
and in the research, when I was looking at all this stuff, I was like, wow, this really is like a big deal. Like people really experience a lot of turmoil when it comes to not knowing. Not knowing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
The unknown, right?
The unknown. Yeah.
But there's a book that I read, right? And I might reference it a couple of times in this conversation, right? Which is Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity, right? And he has this thing. And you could go online and listen to it online about where that fear comes from, right? And that fear, the uncertainty, right, comes from the fear of death, right? Which is the ultimate fear that we all possess, right? Because nobody wants to not exist, right?
Yeah, that's
Right?
part of it.
That is a
Also,
big
I
part
think
of it.
people are like, how am I going to go?
Precisely. But
I don't want to hurt.
the fear of not being anymore, right?
Yeah,
Right?
that's a huge fear.
That is a huge fear. So
Like
one
life
of-
is going to go on when I'm not here regardless.
Exactly.
You know?
So
That's scary.
So then one of the things that he says, right, is to embrace that. And if you start really thinking and meditating on death, right, that there is a freeing point that really comes from it, right? And I'm gonna stop here, but then we'll touch on it later on.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know
Yeah,
that you have
I'm
a lot of
interested
things.
in that.
Yeah. So the fear of death and meditating on it. So, but go ahead. Let's go ahead
I'm
and.
very interested in hearing about that. I've never read that book, so I'm pretty curious to hear what you have to say and how you can liven up this episode with some Alan Watts because he seems to be a little dry. But okay.
What?
Anyway.
What is wrong with you? Alan Watts is, man, listen.
Let's
not
puts
go
me
there.
to sleep
that's you.
every time you have it on TV at night.
He entertains me.
I'm like,
yeah,
done.
Well,
Nah, that's not what I really sound like, just for clarity. But even though Omar thinks differently. Okay. I have a quote. We're starting with a quote. And this one is by Stephen King.
Awesome. Stephen King. Okay.
So he says, and this is interesting because some of the research, that I did wasn't not articles based, but I did some readings, some blogs and some articles that people had written. And he came up quite a few times about this whole fear and uncertainty and things like that. And he says, the most frightening moment is always before you start. After that, things can only get better. So I thought that was interesting because I think a lot of the point of this episode and what we're talking about is that fear holds us back.
It does.
From becoming a better version of ourselves, both personally and professionally.
Yes, it does.
And that is profound. And I have a good example of that before we get into, kind of diving into, embracing uncertainty. And
so here's the thing, right? So we talked about like the whys. Why is fear such a thing, right, with us, right? So number one, I talked about death, right? And the fear of us not existing anymore, right? So that's the ultimate fear, right? Not existing anymore. And, but the underlying, I think in our society more, in our modern world, right? When you start thinking about fears, they derive from social, what's the word? From social acceptance more than anything else, right? Because we are such a success-driven culture, and a culture that is driven by status, right? We don't, whatever we want to say, and for whatever reason, the fear of not being someone, the fear of not being accepted, the fear of not belonging, right? Those are the fears that I think are so much more prevalent now, right? And this is what you see, for instance, the suicide rates skyrocket because people is like, well, I'd much rather not deal with all this, so I'm off. So like, why is it that we're so fearful of things? I remember growing up, and I remember even now in my life, it's about, what people are going to look at me as a failure. I haven't done as much as I should have, this and that and the other, blah, 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 blah. That fear of validation, of not being validated enough. It's one of those things right now that is almost like a plague on our society. Considering all the advancements and everything that we have, it's still something that is like prevalent. So I think this was some of those reasons why.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, I was going to share an example before you started where, when I was saying that fear holds you back from achieving your potential. Right. And, one of the things, and it was a really big fear for me because when I went back to school to get, for my doctorate, I remember having to go to residency for a week. And it was right at the start of our program. Like that was the first thing that we had to do. And actually, I think we were in class already, but we had to go to residency for 5 days. That was my very first one. And I was petrified. I was very nervous. I was scared. And I remember sitting in like a U-shaped with a group of classmates. And I think there was probably 22 or 23 of us. I don't remember exactly. And all of these people, as they introduced themselves, director of this, business own, like all these different titles. And then it came around to me and I was like, I work at this and this is what I do. And it just seems so insignificant. Right. And so I was filled with so much anxiety and so much fear in that moment. Up to that point, I was like, I got this. This is cool, And then in that moment, I was filled with so much uncertainty because I was like, these people are above my level. I don't belong here. And that is called the imposter syndrome. I later found out, but I remember feeling that way so much so that I had talked to you on the phone. And I think I had jokingly said, but I meant it, that if everybody in the room leaves on this break, if they all leave the room, that will be my opportunity to grab my purse and my bag and leave. And nobody will even know that I left. They'll just be like, where did she go? And okay, we'll investigate later. And then, I don't have to face any of these people. And what was interesting about it is that not everybody left the room. There had been other breaks where people just disappeared and I was the last one in there. But in this particular moment, when I thought that and I said it, nobody left. And I was like, I can't just leave because this is going to look bad. I'm going to look bad. It's going to look whatever. The point that I'm making is that had I not stayed or been forced, because I was kind of forced to stay because I was going to leave, I would not be a doctor today and have overcome all of these challenges and fears and things that I had gone through and obstacles to get to the point that I'm at today.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was, I was filled with fear throughout the entire program. When I had my comprehensive exams, remember I got sick with COVID. I was like, oh my God, I can't even function for the first 4 days. And then I only got 10 days to write a 70-page paper. I was petrified and it was scary, but I did it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing right there, right? So one of the things that we used to teach, we used to do this thing in New York called the 5 mile hike, right? I might have mentioned it before, right? So we used to take new Boy Scouts, right? And they have to, we had to walk across the GW Bridge along to the Palisades. But as we had this one exercise in which we put a beam between two trees and they have to walk across it. And we had spotters underneath actually, right? But the idea was not to get across. That wasn't the goal. The goal was because when you are high up, right? So height is one of those big fears that people have.
Oh, when you're high up.
Yeah, height.
I'm sorry.
Height.
Right.
So you were high up, right? That's one of the big fears that people have, fear of heights. You know, public speaking is another one, right?
Yeah.
And the idea was not to get across. The idea is that when you felt, because again, it's like fear manifests in the body, right? You start getting sensations
Physiology,
you get in your physiology. You start
sweating.
You breathing from your chest instead of from your stomach, right?
Breaking out in hives.
So you know, you do that. All those things happen, no, and it is true. Physiologically, it manifests itself, right? So it's like at that moment, it's the idea to collect yourself, right? And then be able to take that extra step. So we always encourage them when you get to that point, it's just take that step.
Take the next step.
Take the next step. You know, and consequently, some of them didn't because it is, you know, it's challenging as a bouncing. Physically, it was a challenging exercise. It's like the rope course when you go to a rope course. You know, it's a challenging exercise, and some people can't physically do it.
Right.
But it was the idea of taking one more step and then seeing where you were before to where you are now.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a kid. And then what you did in there, it was like oh my God, I don't belong in here. But you push yourself to be in there, to take the information in. Yeah. But that also says something else about our culture. I mean, and again, this is what I was saying, about that sense of belonging and the reasons why we belong. You know, it wasn't about you getting the information. And this is how our culture is so perverse in many ways, right? Because it wasn't about you getting the information and getting better as an individual, right? Right. At first it was, but when you got in there, it became about the acceptance,
of course,
of other people.
Yes.
The sense
and
of
what
belonging.
They were going to think of me.
And they have done this and I have done that. But we do that to ourselves constantly. This is a constant thing. And it's very challenging because we are so bombarded by visions and ideas that keep us from really focusing on us. Right? And living our authentic life rather than what somebody else. And I've done it before, but I relate, right? Trying to fit into different environments that I really don't have, not that I don't have any business being, but that I really didn't want to, but I was trying to like be fit in and all that stuff. Is I'm knowing full well that I'm a free-spirited person that doesn't like to be bound, right? That, you know, that doesn't have to, I don't have a certain makeup
right
to be in those things, you know, so it's being authentic too.
Agreed.
But anyways,
living an authentic life. Yeah,
and that's one of the biggest fears that we have right now. It's like the fear because you don't want to be ostracized. But yeah, it's like it's psychologically speaking, right? Yeah, it's like what we're getting at.
So the idea of embracing uncertainty is hard for us, and that's what we're talking about. Is because there's that fear. I keep wanting to say fear factor, the fear component, right? And so, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, we fear what we don't know. Correct. It's like what you're talking about, the beam. You know, you don't know if you take the next step what's going to happen, so you're afraid of it. You know, as I sat there in class, I feared, you know, what else am I going to have to talk about that I'm going to feel less than, or I'm not going to sound as smart as these people, you know. And so that's the part that makes it difficult to trust the process, because what we're asking people to do in this episode is basically trust the process, you know, to embrace uncertainty. And that's difficult.
So this is what I think that idea of meditating about death kind of like fits in, right? So, you know, one of the things that
I was just going to say, so how do we move through and shift our perspectives on embracing uncertainty?
Precisely.
Boom, your turn.
Boom, right? So precisely. So one of the things that we focus
we're on cue here. On cue. We got this.
We're on cue. Perspective, right? Right. So we always talk about the pale blue dot, and we talk about the overview effect, right? We've talked about that in the past. The idea that we're just really in this beam of dust, suspended in a beam of light, going around a star that has a ticking time clock. It will expire, and consequently, so will we, right? So we have to understand that that's a reality of our lives, right? So Alan Watts suggests really meditating on the fact that this is inevitable and that death is inevitable, right? So, and what happens consequently is that if you accept this reality and you shift that perspective, right, then theoretically, right, you should become less fearful. You should become less apprehensive, right? Because the reality is that in the face of inevitable mortality, right? What is the importance of taking another step? What would be the fear of not trying something that you've been wanting to do? Because at the end of it all, there will be a finality to it. So why not try it?
Yeah. I think that's a lot. I mean, that's sort of deep.
It is.
And it's not that it's a bad thing to talk about. I think it's really important because people do fear death. That's a thing, and you have to be able to embrace. You can't ever leave your house because, I'm afraid I'm going to die if I get into my car. I mean, you can't not live.
But we do live like that.
But that's what happens. And in modern society, which is something that I was going to touch on, it's one of the most debilitating things is the way that we live now. It's the way people are going to perceive you, the way that I'm going to show up in this presentation.
Oh, in this video. These people are funny looking. They're talking. What are they talking about?
In this video, I had a fear of doing these podcasts initially. I was deathly afraid because I was like, what are they going to think? We're idiots and this and that. Precisely. Now it's so much easier because we took a step forward. We took we went outside of the norm of doing something and exposing ourselves and talking about ourselves. And once we did that on our very first interview, like my first interview, I put myself out there and talked about things I never talked about with anybody. Correct. And I mean, my brother was like, what? My son was like, what? People were like, wait, what? And some people didn't say anything at all. But I put myself out there. So I faced that fear automatically. I said, I'm just going to, right there, I'm going to put it out there, and we had to do a Soul's Quest.
And that changes perspective, right? When you really start thinking about the stuff that holds us back, right? Like think about it, right? It's our fear of insecurity, right? Our fear of not being secure enough. But again, just meditating and thinking about our finality, right? Thinking about the final, and this is something that I do. That's a practice. I just do thinking about it, getting ready for the finality of my parents. The people around me, because they will go. And and it's not that I'm wishing it to happen because it's not a morbid
no, you just
thing.
Accepted that.
It's that I've seen death before. We have people close to us pass away, and we have to kind of like realize that's a part of life.
Death comes to us all.
So when you really start thinking about that, and that idea of uncertainty of taking action towards a vision or something that you would like to do, or someone in a relationship that you would like to say to them how you feel. It's like you got to be aware that if you don't do it, then what would be the point of living? It's
like there's such a finality to our existence.
Exactly.
That if you don't say something to a significant other or somebody you're interested in, or attempt to do something that you would not normally do, or you always keep saying something about jumping out of an airplane. You have done that before. I am deathly afraid. Like I can't even. When we get to the top of a roller coaster and we go down, I'm like, I feel it in my body, right? But there's a part of me that really wants to experience that, because I think to myself, jump out of an airplane, and if I happen to die, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? And that's what I say now, right? Because I'm doing this episode. Got to sound brave. But I'm just saying, like, why not? You know what I mean? But what's important to understand is that fear is not a bad thing, because throughout history, fear is what has helped us to avoid potential threats And it's what we needed in the past. Like now we have Amber Alerts and we have things that kind of put us onto those things, right? But fear is not a bad thing in and of itself.
No, fear is an evolutionary mechanism to keep us keep us protected and to help us evolve.
There's actually when I was doing the research for this, and I was telling you this before, it's called the evolutionary purpose of fear. And it's basically a deeply rooted thing that we have in our biology, and it's played a vital role in human survival over history or in history. And that's what I'm saying, is that fear is not a bad thing. But we can't allow fear to debilitate us to the point where we don't take action. And we just talked about in a previous episode about vision to action and goal setting. And there's going to be that fear component and that area of uncertainty of not knowing whether you're going to be able to achieve goals or you're going to be able to do things right. But you can't allow those things to debilitate you to the point where you don't do anything at all.
Yeah. Isn't there a saying that goes, courage is not the absence of fear, right?
Yes. I don't remember the quote, but yes.
But something to the fact that courage is actually confronting your fears, right?
Yes.
Because, I mean, you name it, hunting and confronting a bigger animal than you, you know, there's an element of fear in there, but just taking the steps to go out there, you know, getting into a boat and going to a completely different place that you have no idea what it looks like. It's fearful, you know, starting a vision or a business that you have no idea what is going to come out, whether or not it's going to work.
Yeah.
It takes fear, you know, going out and talking to a girl or talking to a guy that you really like, and with the possibility of being rejected, you know, that takes courage. Yeah. But the fear is still there, you know. So it's like we have to be able to understand that the uncertainty comes from the fact that we can't control the outcome.
Right, exactly.
You know, and the ultimate outcome that we cannot control is our lives, right? Like how it ends and how it began. You know, so when we really start accepting that and living from that perspective, that we can't control the outcome, right? The action needs to take place regardless. We cannot control the outcome. You know, and people might say, well, you can and you could. It's like, not 100%. You know, I remember watching this PBS special, and there was some scientists off of an island in Massachusetts, and they were doing something with the environment, and he said specifically, it's like, we thought about everything, and we are 98% sure that it will work. And they asked him, why not 100%? He just said, you just never know.
Yeah. You never know.
It's like you never know because we can't account for everything. You know, it's like going to space. You know, it's like they account for a lot of things, but something could happen that is out of our control. You know, so that uncertainty comes from that, the inability of us to predict with 100% certainty what the outcome is going to be, particularly when it comes to things that we really will like.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing that holds us back from being more courageous, for taking classes, for taking chances, for knowing that we're doing something that is completely soul debilitating. And because we're a fear of looking stupid or being broke or being destitute or doing all this stuff, we don't take those chances. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, that's funny because when you talk about that, it makes me think of people in relationships, or when they're starting to get into relationships with somebody that, you know, you want to be with this person, right? And you're so afraid of doing the wrong thing and saying the wrong thing that you'll mess it up. And I know this person who met another person that they were interested in, and he was so concerned about saying the wrong thing to this person, to this girl. And I mean, it was like something that really like stressed him out. Like he like lost weight and he was really stressed about it. And it's so funny. Once he confronted that and just went with it and just said, you know what, I'm going to do it. What am I going to lose? You know, worst case scenario, she's gone, and you know, whatever, I have to start from scratch. And today, they're great. They're doing great. Yeah, but you know what I mean?
It takes courage.
But had he not done that, he wouldn't be in that relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he really wants to be in this relationship. It means everything to him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just interesting how things like that play out. Like you won't take a chance with somebody. We see movies like that all the time, like love story movies, you know, where I should have done that, or the sliding doors thing and stuff, you know, where if I would have done this differently, this might have happened, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then and again, it's accepting the uncertainty of in the big and I know that, you know, sometimes I tend to be more generalist and macro and all that and out there, right? And talking about death and talking about space and things like that, but in a practical sense, right? Like, and I know this for like my own life. I like building this thing that I want to see kind of like to come to fruition, you know, and having the ideas of what I wanted to. There's a lot of fear of acceptance. There's a lot of fear. It's like, oh, well, you are going in this field. Why this and that and the other, right? And in the last few weeks, because fear has been hitting me, you know, for financial pressures, for things like that, and figuring out, okay, what direction do I go? What changes do I have to make? How are those changes going to truly affect us from a standpoint in the fear of the uncertainty of not knowing when things are actually going to open up and get going, right? Mm-hmm. I came to a point in which I had to take a step back and say, it's not the outcome that matters.
Right.
It's like, I just have to keep doing.
Yeah.
And if I have to make choices, I have to make choices. Mm-hmm. And those choices might work out well, and those choices may not work out 100%. But I'm still here, and I'm still with the vision of what I would like to do. But that's hard. It's challenging. It's like, it gives you the anxiety. It forces you to wake up in the middle of the night. Yeah. You know, so I have to kind of keep reminding myself about, you know, I could die tomorrow. And then what was the point?
True.
You know, I may not get to where I wanted to see happen 100%, but, you know, am I working towards it? Am I enjoying it while I'm doing it?
Yeah. More importantly,
am I feeling creative while I'm doing what I'm doing?
Right.
You know, am I learning something new? Am I having aha moments? You know?
Yeah.
It's like, so when you start shifting the perspective and realizing, yes, this could happen, but you set those values for yourself and you start saying, okay, I'm hitting the creativity. Oh, I feel creative. You know, there's some moments that I just come home and just start working and I feel energized. Mm-hmm. I feel alive. Right. And it's like, okay, that was like really good. It's like when people have a really good workout, right? I don't work out, but the ones that do, they're like, that feel really good. It's kind of like the same feeling, you know, when you're challenging your fears and then you know that the outcome may not be what you want, but and that uncertainty is out of the question. It's like,
well, it's
you savor those little things,
right? And that's exactly what, when I was doing, you know, looking for some supportive information on this, and where I got the stuff from Stephen King is basically what he talks about in the article that I was reading is that action dispels fear.
Yes.
And which is what you're saying. So what happens is the unknowns become known, the uncertainties become certain, and the imagined fears or threats become less threatening in real life than in our minds. Correct. Because what happens is you're taking the next step and you're like, oh, it wasn't so bad. Oh, take another step. Oh, well, that wasn't so bad.
Exactly.
At the end of my doctorate, and as I walked across the stage and got hooded and all this different stuff, I thought to myself, what the hell was I so afraid of?
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't so bad. It was tough and it was very challenging, and I learned a lot, and it, you know, there was a lot of sweat, blood, and tears literally going through that program.
Yeah.
However, when I look back, I think, man, had I not done that, and that's the thing, it says the quest is paved with uncertainties and fear. But as we move through the process to get past the initial fear, step by step, we unlock a potential within us that is far greater than any fear.
Yes.
And that is exactly, I can only use that program as an example, and it can be any program. It was my associate's degree even.
It could be anything.
I mean, it can be anything. You know, I use my doctorate a lot because gotta let everybody know I'm a doctor. Oh my God. It was a challenging program for me. I think it was the most challenging for me because it really challenged me on a variety of levels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when I finished and we were at dinner that night celebrating this accomplishment, I was just like, it wasn't that bad, but it was the actionable steps in that action that dispelled that fear for me.
Yeah.
And now I encourage people all the time, you got to go on for that bachelor's, you get your master's degree, you could do it, if that's what you want. So when you're saying that, it's just doing in the moment, that's what I read a lot of stuff on that.
So, and I'm glad that you brought that example up, right? Because it really is like that, right? So I have a vision for where I want to be. I want to end up, right? Personally and professionally within the next year, right? And I did this letter and I wrote this letter down, right? And what I'm learning while going,
wrote a letter. What?
I wrote a letter.
Uh-huh.
You have the letter,
yeah,
right? Saying what I want to end up in a year.
You just said something brief. I'm like,
yes, sorry. I won't quickly.
You skimmed over that. People are like, "What's he talking about?"
Yeah. So, but one of the things
you wrote a letter about what you want to do and what you want to see happen
in a years from now. Yes. So one of the things that I'm coming to learn now at this stage in life, and again, it's like when you go to work and you're working for somebody or you have a profession, you do your task, right? And your task, you just get those done and you get those out the way, and then that's it. You just do your job. So when it's uniquely yours, right, it becomes more fearful. So to me, my fear has been, oh my God, am I going to get there? Oh my God, are people going to listen? Like, oh my God, it's like, how is all this endeavor going to affect me financially?
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Again,
primarily,
like that's a real fear.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate fear, right? It's a legitimate fear that needs to be overcome tactfully, right? So I'm finding myself really focusing on a day-by-day basis mentally in the way that I talk to myself, in the way that my inner voice is talking to myself.
That's good. Yeah.
Right? In the way that I say to myself, reminding of my values constantly.
Yes.
Like, okay, if I'm doing this, like what value is it hitting?
Yeah.
If I feel like this, what value is it hitting? When I'm feeling down, I ask myself, okay, am I enjoying this? And I'm working really hard mentally and psychologically to make sure that I'm hitting those values, regardless whether the outcome has been reached or not.
Yeah, those are important things to do. And that's powerful.
Yeah,
actually.
and it is.
That process is powerful.
It is minimizing the uncertainty of what happens. Like it's minimizing the effect. So now I'm focusing primarily not so much of if I make a decision right now, what's going to be the adverse reaction? If I make a decision right now, what am I gaining? Am I gaining freedom? Am I gaining creativity? Am I gaining enjoyment? Right?
So what you're doing exactly what I just mentioned.
Precisely.
Action dispels fear.
Exactly.
You're taking actions in the moment, and those are the actions that work for you, and they probably are going to work for a lot of people now that they've heard that, in terms of being in the moment and making sure that everything that you're doing aligns with your personal value system, and that you're living an authentic and genuine
precisely
life.
And it's psychologically, because those actions that I'm taking are like internally.
It's motivating you. It's inspiring you. Yeah, it's a psychological.
And then obviously after that, right, it's the physical action of what I have to do in order to get those things done. So it's a combination of the two. Yeah. Right. But those are the actions that need to be taken on a regular basis to remind, keep it in mind in the top of your mind, because I'm always fully aware of my mortality. Right. But also in the cyclical part that I am right now, I have to also be aware of making sure that I'm doing that I'm talking and focusing within myself to talk in that way, to say to myself before going to sleep, this is what you're seeing, visualizing what I want. It's like you are capable. Just take a deep breath.
It's like powerful positive self-talk is basically kind of what you're doing. Filling a narrative in your head for you.
Changing the narrative.
Changing the narrative. Yes. That changes the way that you perceive things, and it keeps you from that keep you from moving forward.
Precisely.
It's propelling you forward by doing what you're doing, which is a powerful resource or a tool. Obviously.
It is. It's helping out quite a bit, So
it's good to know. We'll add that on our strategies.
I constantly work on that part.
No, that's good though. I'm glad that you shared that, because I don't think we're talking about that in the strategies that we developed today. So today we discussed the idea of embracing uncertainty and turning those fears that we have into fuel for achieving our full fullest potential, right?
Okay.
We have 5 strategies to help facilitate that process.
Awesome. Okay.
So the first one is to understand the nature of your fears, which we kind of discussed today. But you have to recall that fear is an evolutionary response that evolved to safeguard us from threats, ensuring the survival of our ancestors and perilous environments, right? It's been something that's existed and it's helped navigate who we are as a species.
Mm-hmm.
While some fears remain rational and vital, others are irrational and limiting. Differentiating between them enables us to confront fears directly, gaining clarity and breaking free from their grip. Understanding how fears manifest empower us to dismantle its hold and confidently move forward.
Mm-hmm. Shifting perspective on uncertainty, right? Uncertainty often carries a negative connotation associated with discomfort and anxiety. However, by reframing our perspective, we see it as an opportunity for growth. Embracing uncertainty means embracing the unknown with curiosity and openness, recognizing that it is an integral part of our life's quest, of our soul's quest, actually. So I do encourage people to read that book, The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts, and do also listen to his essay on the benefits of thinking about death.
Okay, that's good. Reframing fear as motivation. Rather than allowing fear to paralyze us, we can harness it as a motivational force. Fear, when channeled correctly, can ignite our drive to achieve our goals. It serves as a signpost pointing toward areas of growth and development. By reframing fear as an indication of untapped potential and possibility, we can leverage it to set ambitious goals and propel ourselves forward.
Cultivating resilience and adaptability. In the face of uncertainty, resilience and adaptability are essential attributes to cultivate. Resilience allows us to bounce back from setbacks and challenges, while adaptability enables us to navigate the ever-changing landscape of life. By developing these skills, we become better equipped to handle the twists and turns that uncertainty throws us. Each failure becomes a valuable lesson, propelling us closer to our vision and goals.
And we've definitely had our moments of failures, but we've learned so much from those failures and
temporary setbacks.
I was just saying setbacks because I got to tell you, there's so many things that I've learned from this whole process that we've gone through. And I think that's pretty remarkable when you can actually learn from that and then move forward and still move forward, and have the courage to move forward. Okay. And finally, as Stephen King suggests, embrace courageous action. The final strategy is to take courageous action despite fear and uncertainty. Taking that first step, no matter how small, sets us on a path of progress. By gradually exposing ourselves to our fears, we build resilience and confidence. Each small victory fuels our momentum and strengthens our resolve. Embracing courageous action means pushing beyond our comfort zones, embracing the unknown, and reaping the rewards of growth.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I want to end by saying that Stephen King's quote serves as a reminder that fear is not a signal to retreat, but an invitation to commence. The most frightening moment is always before you start, not because it signals impending doom, but because it represents the threshold of possibility. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Comment below with your thoughts and additional ideas, and remember to stay connected by sharing and subscribing. For more information, visit our website at asoulsquest.com.